This is Mount Scopus College, the largest Jewish day school in the world. Over the last 50 years, the name Mount Scopus has become a byword for academic excellence. But scratch beneath the surface of their extraordinary HSC results, and you'll find a very different story. This documentary looks at the class of 81, 30 years on, as we track down a number of alumni in an attempt to uncover the truth behind the many events, cover-ups and scandals that still reverberates around these halls of academia to this very day.
Government is not the solution to our problems. Government is the problem.
We've gone for main engine start. We have.
President Sadat is hit by 37 bullets, but it is a ricochet which delivers the fatal wound.
That's it. He's flying. He's flying.
Sound is deep in the dark. I hear her voice start to run into the trees, into the
And a great victory for the Blues, completely in command. While the dramatic events of the year can sometimes threaten to overwhelm us, for the class of 81 it was the realisation that they'd be moving on to the next phase of their lives. But what lay beneath this veneer of respectability that made the class of 81 so full of contradictions? There seems to be a consensus amongst experts that there are three specific reasons for this: Ross Friedman, Lewis Weingarten and Jeff Glass. The first of this infamous triad was Ross Friedman, whose notoriety extended beyond the walls of the staff room at Mount Scopus as he routinely monopolised every radio competition on air at the time, winning thousands of dollars worth of prizes. Let's be honest, what's a 15-year-old Jewish kid from Caulfield going to do with a Holden Sandman, 2 jet skis and a $50 drink card at Bojangles? Lewis Weingarten was a lovable rogue who many suspect was borderline OCD because of his unusual habit of wetting his hair before every class. We asked Helen Levine, president of the Lewis Weingarten fan club from 1976 to 81, whether the hair wetting was some sort of mating ritual, and did she find it strangely erotic?
Was his hair wetting a mating ritual? Absolutely. Everything Louis did was a mating ritual. Did I find it strangely erotic? Well, if you put strangely in there, yeah, you could say it was.
And after 3 decades of silence, we tracked down Lewis Weingarten, who revealed the real reason behind such odd behaviour.
Why did I win it? Don't know, I just like the Grecian look, you know? The Italian cool stallion look. But I was so not cool, and still am not.
Jeffrey Glass was a real conundrum, drummer in the popular band Beyond Blue, and according to many, a real knockabout bloke. Yet he had a face that could launch 1,000 projectiles, mainly by his teachers.
It was an event that occurred when we were about year 10. We had a computer science class, and one of my classmates by the name of Jeff decided that he liked to call himself Jim. And we could all sort of handle it, but the computer science teacher just couldn't. And at one point he just sort of snapped and he said, "What's your name?" And Jeff said, "Jim." And our teacher picked up a desk and flung it at him, and Jeff luckily ducked, and I'm not sure if it went through the window or smashed against the window, but it's so memorable that we're talking about it 30 years later.
I remember that. That was in computer science one year. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I was actually. Yeah, I was when he pushed it over at him.
Yes, I was. The desk went through the window, yes. Jeff didn't.
So I was in Lapidot's class the day that Jeff Glass's glasses were chucked out the window. It was hysterical. Lapidot was always crazy.
I can't recall. I do recall that Mr. Lapidot had a fiery temper. I was the recipient of many a clip over the ear. I'm sure Jeff Glass deserved it.
Yes, I was in Mr. Lapidot's class when Jeff's glasses got thrown out the window, but I thought he got thrown out the window.
Nope. But Mr. Lapidot made me cry. Mr. Lapidot made me cry one day after Mishnah. I just have a very strong memory of standing behind the classroom door crying.
On the flip side, there were many instances where the students were a danger to themselves, such as when Ellie Goldfinger decided to use himself as a projectile by running through a plate glass window. To this day, it's still unclear whether this was a premeditated act or a spur-of-the-moment decision.
So Ellie Goldfinger went through a plate glass window in the stairwell somewhere that led out to where he went to the matric centre, and it was either Form 2 or something like that, and it was pretty ugly, if I recall.
I do remember that he ran through a plate glass window, and I was extremely concerned about this poor boy who ended up, as I recall, quite bloody and dishevelled.
Still gives me nightmares.
Ellie ran through the plate glass window because he didn't see it.
I remember Ellie Goldfinger running through the plate glass window. In fact, I remember seeing him afterwards as well. It was pretty horrific. He was being chased by someone, but I don't exactly remember what it was.
When Ellie ran through that plate glass window, we thought he was dead.
Yes, I do have a memory of Ellie running through a window. How is he?
The stakes were raised when an alert Alan Schmiedel saved the life of a choking Jeff Grant, who swallowed the cap of a highlighter pen. Was it a botched suicide attempt or a cry for help? Because Mr. Forgas was slowly killing him with boredom anyway.
I remember there was an incident once where Jeff Grant swallowed the top of a pen or something or other, and I wasn't there, but I did recall hearing that Schmiedel saved his life. But I don't know exactly what happened, but I know that Schmiedel was famous for having apparently saved his life.
It absolutely happened. He was sucking on the plastic lid of a highlighter pen, and I said to Granny, don't you know plastic will give you cancer? And the first thing that happens, he goes and he starts choking, and then I got up, I slammed him on the back of on the back, right up the top here. I kept hitting him until he spat it out. It took like maybe 30 seconds, but it eventually came out. And then we apologised for disturbing the class.
Biblical studies was almost getting as boring and hellish for me as Hebrew was 2 years before, and I thought, well, what else can I go down to Renoshi and say, what else can I do other than biblical studies? I don't think there was any alternative, so suicide was a viable option.
After Elliot Epstein inadvertently flashed his naked bum to the entire school body, insiders claimed that a brooding and agitated Mr. Renoshi was plotting to make sure that as principal he'd never be upstaged ever again. Later that year, at another assembly in front of the entire school, a trembling Mr. Renoshi delivered his unforgettable "Who Tore the Jumper" speech. Many observers claimed it was Renoshi's Martin Luther King "I Have a Dream" moment. But the question remains, who was the perpetrator?
Mr. Renoshi got up and had a go at us all for vandalism. I don't know whether you'll remember that, when he held up the jumper. This is disgusting, right? It was torn. And then the school photographer took a photo of him just as he did it.
And I just snapped the photo there, right at the moment when he was holding that last note, holding the jumper up, and just the red in the face, and it broke the hall up. It broke everyone up. It just broke the moment. And I got some death stares from a few people, and I thought, this is going to be interesting. Took the camera at the end of the assembly, went back to the dark room, was in the process of unloading the camera to start developing it, and Mr. Carp walked in, said, "Give me the camera," unrolled the film, took it out, put it in his pocket, walked out. Never saw it again.
Yes, that I remember. He went berserk that day.
I remember us all sitting watching this man trying to understand, because his accent was so heavy, what exactly he was trying to say about the jumper.
I do have a memory of the assembly with the jumper. It was like Who Killed JR.
You know, I don't even know who the perpetrator was. I can't remember now. 30 years ago, I can't remember who it was. Was it Schmitty? I can't remember. Or maybe it was Alan Oshlack. I don't know who it was. Ross Friedman.
I have to admit, it wasn't me.
It wasn't me.
Was it David Jagoda or Jeffrey Grant?
I think probably David Jagoda tore that jumper.
I would say it was a group of boys, not just one perpetrator. I think there were a few involved.
From time to time, gave us a lot of entertainment. So I believe it is Mr. Ross Friedman who was the tearer of the jumper.
In 1981, there seemed to be a lot of latent antagonism between a number of Year 12 students and certain teachers. That tension came to a head over the notorious Macintosh Mini incident. Mr. Macintosh's Mini Miner was somehow relocated from the teacher's car park to the primary school playground and left open to be used as a new playground attraction by hordes of unlicensed 5 to 7-year-olds. Without any evidence, Mr. Macintosh and Mr. Fergus immediately accused Robert Herskew and David Jagoda of being the masterminds behind this act of vandalism. Stan Watt, the much-beloved Class of 81 form convener, helped to broker a rapprochement, and both Herskew and Jagoda were both eventually exonerated. 3 decades later, we attempt to uncover who were the real perpetrators.
And we took the car, we lifted the car from the back of the Matrix Centre to the front of the quadrangle at the front of the school. And then we opened up the doors, and then we said to the kids, this is your new play car. And then the kids went, yay! And then someone took off the handbrake, and then the car started rolling down the hill. And then Ross Freeman quickly jumped in the car, and then he put on the handbrake, and we left it there. And I think someone knocked the horn, and the horn was going.
I was not part of it, but I enjoyed every minute of it.
I don't know who took part in it. I suspect that David Jagoda took part in it, but I don't know who else.
I think it was myself and David Jagoda. I think we got kids. We got some of our classmates. I think Ross Friedman and Mark Shaw and Mark Swatoe and I don't even remember. And Harry Zaitman and Glenn Halley.
The Mr. Macintosh Mini Miner incident. Absolute comedy gold. Hilarious. Unfortunately, I can't take any credit for that whatsoever. I was accused by Mr. Fergus and Mr. Macintosh of being the co-mastermind with Robert Herskew. I tried to explain my innocence, but it was futile. I was taken downstairs and interrogated by both of them. And they threatened me. Well, they couldn't threaten me with expulsion. They couldn't threaten me with suspension, as it was the last day of HSC. So what they did is they said that if I didn't come clean with any co-conspirators, that they would make me sit my HSC exams out at the exhibition buildings in the city.
I was involved in the mini incident with Mr. Macintosh's car, and we wrapped it up in, I think if I recall, it was toilet paper, and we got the computer teletypes to print out Macca the Whacker all the way along the teletype strips, put a ladder over it, and then we pushed it out somewhere. I can't remember where, but yeah, and we got into serious trouble. Got held back.
The image of Jewish children being herded onto a train from a station platform usually reminds one of Kindertransport in 1942, not Spencer Street Station in 1976. Despite the negative connotations that may have arisen We discover why the perversely named Scopus Express remains one of the happiest memories at Scopus for many of the class of 81.
In relation to the Scopus Express, I've got a photo of Nigel and I carrying a suitcase to a train station, and I just remember feeling a little bit like being in Auschwitz on the train on the way to the Holocaust.
I don't know why, but I didn't have a bunk member at the time, and neither did Fiona Pratt. And for some reason we came together, and I don't know if it was somebody who said, Nikki doesn't have a bunk and you don't have a bunk, so why don't you bunk together? And I thought, here's this really groovy, cool chick out of the groovy club, and I was here, this little nothing, and I think we had a really good time. I loved Scopus Express, it was the best.
Yes, I've got some great memories of the Scopus Express. Paul Adler's socks stink.
I remember I had a suitcase full of food, snacks, to keep us going for the 5 days we were on the train. And I just remember getting off at all these amazing country towns that I would never have gone to otherwise.
And I remember being with Carmela, bunking with her on the Scopus Express, both having our first cigarettes in that train carriage. Both of us arrived and sat down and both went, oh my God, I've got to tell you something. Oh my God, I've got to tell you something. And we both, if you like, had reached that momentous time in a woman's life.
I think Gabby and Andrea were in the cabin next to me. I remember Esther Leibovich running around after Stephen Sharp because I've got photos of them. I think I kissed Peter Hendel on the Scopus Express.
Very little. Year 7, I remember. I remember Mr. Kosky was the guy in charge. I think I was going out with Esther Leibovich. That's all I can remember.
Was it that hot chocolate song that was on, and it just kept being played and played, and it drove me crazy.
Louis Weingarten must have gotten with someone, and Lisa Schweik must have gotten with someone. I don't know. It was together with other people.
Oh God, I think I was running into some of the girls' areas and nearly got caught by, I can't remember who. So I actually never knew Robert Hersky. That was the first time I met Robert, because I actually jumped into his room and jumped into bed with him. So that was that's how Rob and I became really good friends.
That was the unveiling of Louis Weingarten at the Scopus Express, because I remember I shared a bunk with Leon Burston. Did I share a bunk with David Jagoda? I can't remember. And that was the unveiling of Louis. That's when we all met Louis.
Yet the following year, the school thought that an old decommissioned army base located near the town of Ballarat, one of the coldest and dampest places in the state, would be an ideal place for a school camp. It was so chilly, isolated, and the facilities so Spartan. About the only thing the students could do was to learn how to smuggle in contraband, contract hypothermia, and take embarrassing group photos.
I totally remember thinking I should have packed more wind cheaters. I was really cold and I wore the same wind cheater for about 3 days because I had underpacked.
I think I remember unsuccessful attempts to endear myself to certain young women. They all failed.
I remember Mr. Barnard chasing us around, and we had some slime on our stomachs, and I remember the food, which was a bit scary, and I remember that it was quite boring.
I remember very clearly how cold it was. I remember trying to avoid going to the toilet on a daily basis because it was too cold to drop the pants.
It was cold and it was wet. When we had to go outside and do outdoor activities, and it was bloody freezing. It was just terrible.
It was cold. It was cold. It actually reminded me of the set of Hogan's Heroes. It was sort of that POW style camp, really.
I had to share, no one would share a room with me, and so I got put with a guy called Dov Burns, who, from what I remember, had eczema in his eyes. His eyes used to bleed. I can't quite remember too much detail of it, but it was quite traumatic.
Oh yeah, it was a shithole. I just remember something like, I don't know whether this is Counterpoint or not though, but I do remember that they used to try to wake us up in the morning with music, and Ross cut the wires to the speaker.
The one event stands out, have to be Form 3, grounded to our room, Elle and I, at Ballarat. I think we got caught trying to get into the girls' dorm, so we were singing Dylan protest songs, and that was the start of a great friendship.
It was an army barracks. It was cold, freezing. Everyone wore Ugg boots and beanies and shivered, and it was fun.
Dear God, hope you got the letter, and I pray you can make it better down here. I don't need a big reduction.
Every year, Mount Scopus College would send their students back to Ballarat for a religious camp euphemistically called Counterpoint. The school would import hip young rabbis from New York who were armed with sidurs and acoustic guitars and entrust them with exposing all these young and vulnerable minds to 8 days of intensive Orthodox Judaism.
You know, I remember that a lot of the girls were in tears, you know, because they were all finding themselves. And I thought, yeah, no, I know where I am, pretty much.
Major brainwashing, coming home and wanting to keep kosher for the rest of my life, and I think it lasted 24 hours. My parents were thrilled.
My experiences from Counterpoint is I remember coming home and I became religious for 5 days, and my parents nearly killed me because I made them move all their dishes out of the kitchen, and I tried to be kosher for 5 days and it didn't really work.
Fiona calling me from a phone box saying, "Oh my God, it's Healthy Bread!" And then it just went dead. Like the phone went dead. I was thinking, oh, thank God I didn't go. And it was like she'd been kidnapped. It was like Scientology before there was Scientology.
Everybody sort of whipped up in this sort of Jewish frenzy, doing the Jewish dances, and me running around with Adrian Fagland, who was sitting on my shoulders, and he didn't duck at the right place as he hit one of these overhead beams, and that wasn't a pretty picture.
I remember feeling quite cynical, and I remember thinking, these people are completely insane.
Yet 3 decades later, most students' overriding memory of Counterpoint is of a young Rick Goldberg, who transcended his upper-middle-class upbringing in Kew, and with one revolutionary act, was able to do what Counterpoint, the chief rabbi, the Pope, and the Archbishop of Canterbury could never hope to achieve. And that was to prove unequivocally to everyone of the existence of the Almighty himself. If a guy like Rick, who was only 15, could crack on to a gorgeous kitchen hand who was 3 years older, a university student, and wasn't Jewish, then there had to be a God.
Didn't Rick Goldberg get sent home for stooping the chef's assistant?
When Rick Goldberg was kissing the cook, by far was the greatest memory of, almost one of my greatest memories of my school.
Rick Goldberg and one of the camp hands of the female persuasion.
That was the that's where Rick did the deed with that the cook, I think, wasn't it? Or the kitchen hand.
Yes. I remember the Rick Goldberg incident with the kitchen hand at Counterpoint, like it happened last month.
My overriding memory of Counterpoint had to be Rick Goldberg. It's on the highlights of high school for me, basically. What can I say about Rick Goldberg that hasn't been said before? Maverick, iconoclast, dare I say, almost a messianic figure.
When we came out of the showers, there was a crowd of people over by the long grass, and they were watching some rabbis creep up on Rick. And Rick was in the long grass helping the chef's assistant find her contact lens. The rabbis caught him, yep. It led to a sort of resistance movement that Rick was championed. You know, he was a countercultural hero.
It's been alleged that I was out with one of the Counterpoint staff, but I understand that the only evidence of that are two guys that were wearing dressing gowns at the time at about 5:30 in the afternoon. So I'm not sure if their evidence is reliable. I was seen by the rabbis, and I was hauled straight into afternoon prayer services. That's really all I can say. For about 5 minutes, I did think I was going to get expelled or suspended, but thankfully someone found pity on me and didn't do so.
Sport was essentially relegated to almost being an extracurricular activity at Mount Scopus. Yet marginal sports such as pyramid stacking, simulated synchronised swimming and cheerleading seem to be given as much prominence at the school as blue ribbon sports such as Aussie rules. This is despite having VFL ruckman and future West Coast Eagles coach Ron Alexander, who coached the school first 18 football team to 3rd place in the Association of Eastern Independent Schools League. Not bad, considering the side played in bare feet all year. But did the lack of emphasis of sport at Scopus detract from the overall high school experience?
Well, I think that in relation to Be Strong and of Courage, Mount Scopus encouraged 2 sports, which was arguing and running away.
How can you be strong and of good courage when there's no emphasis on sport at the school?
I think there wasn't, sport was a very minor part of the school. It wasn't considered important, as you said, which is a pity because, I love the sporting part of school.
Absolutely not. For me, I did volleyball, but that didn't work because I was worried about breaking nails. Hockey was about mud fights with the hockey sticks because it was a winter sport, so there was a lot of mud, or using them as can sticks or something. And then my biggest sport was bludgeon sport on Wednesday afternoon.
Well, it did because in year 12 I went to Maccabi, and Mr. Enoshi called me into his office and he told me that I should repeat year 12 if I'm going to go to Maccabi, and if I went it would be on my own back and that they would offer me no support when I got back, and they didn't.
Coming from Geelong Grammar, where it was more about sport than study, that was one of the few perks of Scopus. They didn't give a shit about sport.
I don't think it detracted. I certainly at times felt a little strange because I was putting so much effort into my sport in an environment where it wasn't particularly encouraged.
Like if it was raining on sport day, Elle and I would say that we suddenly needed to go see Mrs. Field, the school psychologist, and go to her room and play with her pet rocks.
But when it came to one sport, the sport of kings, who will ever forget that first Tuesday in November in 1979, at around 3 p.m, when everyone at Mount Scopus, like the rest of the nation, stopped what they were doing and huddled around a transistor radio. For the next 4 minutes, while they may not have been at Flemington, they felt like they were at the centre of the universe, as they cheered the Herskew-owned and Bart Cummings-trained Hyperno across the line to win the cup.
Hyperno, the big danger on the inside, Salamander. Hyperno coming at it, Salamander. Hyperno, Salamander. They hit the line, and Hyperno has won it by a note.
I have memories of the 1979 Melbourne Cup where Hyperno won, because I was sitting next to Robert Herskew at the time, and the radio was on. The teacher let us have it, and didn't know anything about horses. Still don't, but Robert went ballistic, and it was sort of fun to have a bit of time out and listen to the cup.
Hyperno was the most successful horse ever in our year.
I remember there just being an enormous cup at Robert Herskew's house, and there was a lot of champagne, and somebody chipped a tooth.
I actually do. I remember there was great excitement on the day, even before the race, because we knew that Hyperno was going to be running, and they brought a radio into the classroom so Robert could listen to it, or we all got to listen to it actually, and it was huge. It was really exciting, and a lot of kudos to all of us again, because we were at school with Robert. So it's great.
Sitting in the classroom with Robert saying, Hyperno!
Well, my memories are that I think the year prior to that, Robert told me to put money on Hyperno, and it came a place. And the following year, Robert said, look, yes, I can't remember how he said it. It's like, the way Robert says things. You got to put money on this horse, and I never did, and it won. So I do recall that.
No. We're at Sports Day, and then Sports Day, I think, finished a bit early, and then we all went home, didn't we? No. Back to I can't remember. Were we at Sports Day?
Robert invited a few close friends back to his place to celebrate. There was George, there was Handbrake Harry White, the jockey, there was Bart Cummings. It was a brilliant night. There I was in my school uniform, taking turns drinking out of the Melbourne Cup and sculling champagne with the guy next to me, happened to be Sir Billy McMahon, the ex-Prime Minister.
Did you come with us? Did we go to the Southern Cross after?
For many of the class of 81, their fondest memories of school life was the involvement in the house plays. The time and effort put into these productions was extraordinary. But one play whose narrative revolved around contemporary Jewish life stands out to this very day as a paradigm shift for the theatre at Mount Scopus College. Unlike all the other house plays that were either Broadway or West End productions, A Lobster at My Daughter's Wedding was written by two members of the class of 81, Elliot Perlman and Andrew Komisarov, and produced by fellow classmate Linda Bleich. 20 years later, 2/3 of the Lobster team, Elliot and Lindy, would reunite to adapt Elliot's seminal book, $3, into a feature film. Unfortunately, Andrew Komisarov declined our numerous requests to be interviewed for this documentary. We asked the co-author and celebrated novelist Elliot Perlman what was he trying to achieve when writing the play.
The play was about, in a sense, it's the old story. It's Romeo and Juliet, the star-crossed lovers from two families that are against each other. Here we had, in Jewish Melbourne, an Australian Jewish, very assimilated family and a Polish Jewish family. And, the tensions. I remember Fiona Pratt, as she was then, who was outstanding as the Jewish grandmother from Poland. She was the character, the mother of the assimilated Australian. She was still Polish Jewish, but her family had become Australian. They changed their name from Levinsky to Lewin something. Maybe Lou, I don't know, can't remember. But one of her favourite lines when she was asked if she'd like to sit down on the beanbag, she said, "Beans are for eating, not sitting on."
Sure, I didn't act in it. I only directed it and produced it. Loved working on that play. It became a labour of love because I think we were all so much a part of it, with Elliot and Andrew having written it, and it was mainly our year that was in it. I think so. It was really about our year. And was it a house play or just a school play? I'm not sure about that, but we did so well on it that we were actually asked to put that play on in a proper theatre.
An important part of the rich tradition of theatre at Mount Scopus were the lavish musical productions, such as Fiddler on the Roof, Salad Days and Oklahoma.
So I loved the musicals at school, and I was in quite a few of them, and I was in Fiddler on the Roof and several others.
Yes, I was involved in 3 of them. There were 2 Fiddler on the Roof ones. One of them was an inter-school with all these other schools, and one of them was just our school. And then I was in Oklahoma. I played the lead opposite Stephen Sharp.
Well, I would have liked to, but I could never got a look in ahead of Michael Starr and Debbie Jago. I mean, they got the part every year.
Sometimes what goes on backstage is more entertaining and contains far more drama than the actual show itself. 30 years later, we can reveal how the romantic leads, Deborah Jago, Stephen Sharp, Mike Starr and Lisa Rothberg, turned Rodgers and Hammerstein's Oklahoma into Paul Mazursky's Comment on Free Love, Bob and Carol, Ted and Alice.
Yeah, I think probably you could say that life imitated art a little bit with around the time of Salad Days, and Sharpie as I remember it. Sharpie and Debbie Jago were the leads, and the two of them, they'd been friends for a long time, and I'd sort of I think I got to know Debbie sort of through Sharpie probably, I think I was together with Sandra Jason, and Sharpie's with Debbie Jago, and then I think there might have been some sort of swapping thing, and Sharpie got together with Lisa Rothberg instead, or, it was very messy.
Stephen Sharp and I were together on stage and off stage. That's right, he did. He dumped me she was actually a really good friend of mine, Lisa Rothberg. He dumped me for her. Sandra Jason and I were both playing the lead role in Oklahoma. As far as I know, she never went out with any of those boys, Stephen Sharp or Mark Starr, as far as I know.
Well, it was not so bad being in the musicals. I try to tell people.
Words in papers, words in books, words on TV, words for books, words of comfort, words of peace, words to make the fighting cease, words to tell you what to do, words are working hard for you. Eat your words but don't go hungry, words have always nearly hung me. Words of nuance, words of skill, and words of romance are a pill. Words are stupid, words are fun, words can put you on the run. Mots pressés, mots sensés, mots qui disent la vérité, mots maudits, mots mentis, mots qui manquent le fruit d'esprit.
Briggsy, my understanding is he's working in a McDonald's somewhere in Memphis, alongside Elvis.
I heard that he was living on Garibaldi Street in Buenos Aires and had been picked up by the Mossad.
He either became a politician, an architect, or a lap dancer.
What do you mean what happened to John Briggs? John Briggs lives in all of us.
Dunno, I heard he was a gravedigger in Springvale, wasn't he?
That's very controversial. I'm a little worried about answering that question.
I heard he went and lived overseas. Maybe he's Julian Assange?
I think John Briggs must be a professor somewhere now.
From what I understand, John Briggs went to India in search of enlightenment. Last seen at the foothills of Mysore, in a cave, chanting his daily mantra, Rick Goldberg, tra-la-la-la, Rick Goldberg, tra-la-la-la-la. And I believe after 30 years he has found inner peace.
Didn't he rob a train, John Briggs? Or was that Ronald Briggs?
Maybe he's living happily in Argentina somewhere.
No idea.
As each classmate makes those first arthritic steps towards the 40th reunion, it's worth reflecting on all the joys and sorrows, pains and pleasures, and all the lessons learnt about ourselves, our friends, our teachers, and most of all, about life. We'll now leave the class of 81 for another 10 years, with those immortal last words heard by every Mount Scopus student. Pens down.
should have sent these 5 questions to us first.
You've asked me to predict the false messiah that Rick Goldberg will nominate as his favourite. I'm going to stick my neck out. I'm going to say Shabtai Zvi.
There can only be one, I think. I think it's the only one I remember. Subtai Zvi.
Sorry, give me back.
Everyone,
say again?
You've obviously had media training too. Okay, so...
Can I say something?
Yeah, no, do you remember the Renoshi who tore the jumper essentially?
Who could forget it?
No, you gotta say...
I can't say that.
You gotta say...
Yes!
So, yes, I do remember the Renoshi who tore it.
Alright.
So we did a couple of nights at a regular theatre, which was very flattering, really, to be asked to do it professionally. You have to edit that.
Oh, God, this is 30 years ago. Oh, I feel like I'm in a deposition.
And there was all the excitement with the mud drifts and all the goings on with that, which made it, how shall I say, just more interesting that it might have other been, it made it more interesting that it might have otherwise been.
Oh, maybe Mel put a sign on the door that says don't ring the doorbell. Yeah. Then you don't have to stop it.
And then, okay, if you don't know something, so answer it like this.
Haven't you got a multi-choice?
No, this was an interview.
Oh, can't you give me a clue?
Oh, God. It's not a test.
What?
I knew this would be hard.
Yes.
Do you know who tore the jumper?
Probably you.
No, I'm not being
Hi everyone.
However, I do believe the jury's out on that one.
Can you name names?
I can't name names. With confidence.
Do that again.
What's that?
Do that again.
Why?
You're sort of making too much. You're sort of making too much of it.
Yeah.
You need to be a bit more sort of, a bit more like
Throw away. Okay.
And you need to say that you were drinking from the Melbourne Cup.
Yeah.
Shh, guys, shush.
A lot of people thought that Uri Cohen was Yasser Arafat. I'm not sure. I never had the answer.